What were we better at doing 100 years plus ago? We were actually better at recycling 100 plus years ago than we are now. Mainly because they didn't have disposable things, compost was a fact of life, and people would use things until they absolutely couldn't. So there was no throwing a jar out, for example. You would clean the jar and reuse it for storage or preserves. Organic waste wasn't thrown in the garbage can, it was tossed out into the compost and then used in the garden. Soap was made from ashes and animal fat, or could be bought commercially, but there were a lot of rural people in the 20s still making their own soap. Bones could be sold to the bone man or used for stock/aspic. It's not that the good stuff became unavailable. The cheap stuff became much cheaper and better. I could buy a table that lasts me a lifetime. It would probably cost the same or less in relation to an average person's monthly wages as a table back then, would be much better finished, would also last a long time, unless I ruined it by not taking care of it. But I can also go to IKEA, and buy functional furniture for literally 1/10 of the price, about as much as I'd pay just to move the fancy furniture. I can get something that perfectly fits my apartment, and it looks modern, not 100 years old. There's a reason you can often get those well-made antiques for cheap. Furniture of the same price point is actually more or less the same quality. But you don't buy very expensive furniture and live in a sparse house if you are not the elite of society. There were plenty of ways to cut corners in the old days, we just don't see that furniture around anymore. In Appalachia there are a lot of Amish-made furniture stores. And they are expensive. My parents' microwave lasted 34 years. I bought them the same style microwave in 2013 and it lasted 2 years. Hell, even 20 years ago. I got my desk from Office Depot in high school about 15 to 20 years back. It was like $70 to $80, modular design to be assembled at home, but the parts are all solid wood instead of particle board. I don't disagree, but there might be survivorship bias. The cheap furniture from 100 years ago has likely not survived. My wife's grandparents both worked in the furniture industry in the mountains of North Carolina, and we have some pieces they actually helped make. The quality is stunning, not just the materials but the construction. I refurbish antique furniture when I get a chance. I picked this kitchen table for $80. It didn't look like that, there was a lot of sanding involved. I love the intricate detail in older furniture. I make custom furniture as part of a personal business. I get lots of quote requests for pieces which people are then shocked to discover the price on. The price I quote them isn't inflated by any means, it's just made from real wood instead of literal cardboard. Break open an IKEA lack table and the core is just a web of cardboard. People are frequently confused when they hear what I'm charging them, and don't understand why I'm asking for so much. My itemized quotes have every single material, and the cost of raw lumber is more than the cost of the piece at some mass-manufactured brand they're comparing my price to. I've had to prepare form responses to politely explain to people the difference between real furniture and home decor that looks like furniture. It's an uphill battle. There was cheap furniture too. But most of the cost-cutting measures hadn't been invented yet. I've studied old techniques for fabrication, and the corner-cutting measures from the early 20th century were mostly "it looks better if I do this, but it takes a lot of work to hide the process, so I just won't." They'll appreciate the savings more than the aesthetics anyways. The difference today is that the baseline has moved down. Modern high-end furniture from retail stores is the same as cheap furniture 100 years ago, and modern cheap furniture is produced to be fully disposable with materials that cannot be repaired and assembled in manners that won't last more than a few years. Canned soup is designed with a longer shelf life than most end tables. Whilst true, I work in recycling and there is no end to low-grade veneered furniture from the last 100 years being thrown away. None of it is bad as such, but it's not high quality by any means. High-end hardwood furniture is still being made too. You can still buy high-quality furniture, it just costs a lot more. I would imagine that furniture back in the day, at least the kind that was high quality enough to survive 100 years, was also quite expensive. Also keep in mind survivorship bias. The cheap ugly stuff from 100 years ago probably hasn't made it to our time. Exactly. I can't tell you how much that stuff irritates me. I've seen someone toss out a working iPad because they wouldn't get more than $50 for it. My boyfriend's parents rented a dumpster when they split up and moved and tossed everything they didn't want to take with them because a garage sale was too much work. As a woodworker, I strongly agree, although there is definitely a survivor bias. A lot of stuff was made by hand in an era when things were made to last longer. Disposable particle board and staple furniture-shaped garbage from IKEA is the norm now. People wasted nothing back then because too many had next to nothing. I've been making an effort to do these. I started a compost pickup once a week. That dollar goes to the teens picking it up and it goes to their community garden. I've been trying to keep and reuse jars, use reusable bags for groceries, etc. Jars and tins are cool. I actually ran out the other day and am waiting to finish my peanut butter. LOL. People, including me, have too much stuff. I lived in a van for a while. So simple. No excess of stuff. I've been trying to get back to that. Giving away shit I don't need and not buying it again. I had 2 drawers of beauty samples thanks to Ipsy. Like why? I don't need that stuff. It's a pain when you do buy something you know it's going to break sooner than later. I try buy old stuff, like my vacuum is old ASF but it's so good. Found it on free market, you can feel the difference. I know if you have to buy new, buy to last, it's just brands you used to trust, who knows anymore. Like I wanted one good set of pots and pans and I spent $600. Everyone said they are the best and they still chipped after 3 years, sad face. I always imagine the guy who invented plastic saying, I didn't mean for you to use it for everything. Furniture was so much higher in quality a century ago that most people today do not even have the imagination to explore just how unbelievably superior it was. Not all furniture, of course. There was cheap furniture too. But most of the cost-cutting measures hadn't been invented yet, and most furniture was still made with care by people who spent their lives doing this stuff. I'm a photographer. My studio has been in business 104 years this year. The other day, a lady brought in a print of her parents from when they got married in 1921 to have some restoration work done. I told her that the photo was taken in the studio, and when she asked how I knew, I told her that I have and still use the posing chair her mother was sitting on. She didn't believe me, so I brought it out and she was flabbergasted. I use the thing damn near daily. It needs a little repair work as it's well used, and the dry air has caused some of the smaller pieces to dry and crack, but it's a great piece. You're definitely correct, but it's good to touch on the fact that there was bad furniture too. We just don't see it now because it was bad and didn't last. Lots of 100-year-old stuff that was tossed together with brad nails and fell apart. I think the bottom of the barrel junk always existed, but for whatever reason the real quality stuff was more accessible. Getting a high-quality dinner table exists today too, but doing so will cost you an insane amount of money. I doubt people were dropping 4 months' pay on a table 100 years ago. It was, but there is another issue in addition to it being cheaply made. The quality of the wood itself. Look at something as simple as pine. Simple dimensional lumber, 2x4 pine, which is currently 1-1/2 by 3-1/2 inches, was 1-3/4 by 3-3/4 inches a century ago. Only a small part of the reason homes built pre-1950s were stronger. But more importantly, look closely at the grain structure, smaller thickness in between growth rings, which means the tree used for that lumber was not only much older, average 2 to 4 times older, but far stronger and insect resistant compared to the same lumber harvested today. Only thing worth making furniture out of these days is red oak, if you plan it to last more than 5 to 10 years. It's also crazy expensive, so nearly all manufacturers use new growth pine or composites. Even the cheap furniture a century ago was built better than 95% of anything you can buy modern day. I cringe when I see DIYers take a perfectly constructed antique furniture piece and hack it up, sand it down to beautiful grain and then paint it black and cover half of it in burlap.